Welcome back, fight fans. We're back with another one. It's actually number 60 now, just climbing up there over and over again. Now, we've got another short one again today. Obviously, we've got nothing to talk about from last week. No UFC there. So for this week, it is just UFC Vegas 62, Alexa Grasso, Viviane Araujo. That is the main event for this week back in Vegas. And then, of course, next week we'll be going to the pay-per-view. But we've actually got a lot to talk about next week because next week, well, today actually, there's BFL going on, Battlefield Fight League. That is being held in Vancouver, as always. Well, at least I think it's being held in Vancouver. I'm pretty sure. That's where it usually is. So we're going to talk about that next time because obviously can't talk about it now because it is going to start about 2-3 hours from now. But I will be watching that, which means next week, like I said, we'll be talking about that. Then we'll be talking about UFC Vegas. Actually, I would probably flip that. We'd be talking about Vegas first. Then we'd be talking about BFL. And then actually, I don't actually know which day this is going to be next week, but there's actually going to be the second round of Road to UFC. That was the tournament that started. I actually don't know when. It was about 4 or 5 months ago. It was when they went to Singapore, UFC Singapore. They're going to be continuing that with, of course, just before UFC 280. So I think that's either on the Thursday or the Friday or both. I don't know. But anyway, that will be next week as well. But I guess that would be covered on the show after that. So I probably won't be talking about it unless, of course, I talk about the lead up because these are people that we have talked about before. So maybe I'll talk about it. Maybe I won't. I'm not really sure. We'll see what happens. Actually, probably not because we've got enough with BFL Vegas and the pay-per-view. Anyway, let's get started on this week. It's a nice short one. We're probably only going to be about half an hour, 45 minutes this time. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more. Who knows? So we'll open it up. The card, well, at least the main card opens up with, well, as of now anyway, this is how it's opening up. I don't know. They might be switching it around, but it seems like a pretty good main card for me, at least, to be honest. So I don't think they'll be switching it around too much. So it will open up with Mana Martinez, Mana Martinez and Brandon Davis. Pretty close one, I gotta say. Martinez didn't get his contract the first time out on the Contender Series, but he actually did grab 2 first-round finishes to make it into the UFC anyway. And that is where he earned a split decision win over Guido Canetti, who we actually just saw. Not last week, but the week before that in the last UFC event. And then he actually lost to Ronnie Lawrence, who is very, very good. So no slouch here in Mana Martinez. Brandon Davis definitely has more experience. Hasn't really done that well, though, in the UFC. This is actually his second stint in the UFC. His first one, he ended up going 2-5, not necessarily that great. He lost to, but he did lose to some pretty talented guys. Zabit, who we haven't seen in a very long time, but very, very good. Kyung Ho Kang and Giga Chikadze. So definitely pretty solid competition there to fall out of the UFC. But then he came back in, and then he lost in the first round to Dana Batgeti, or Batgeti Dana, however you want to order his name. But very, very talented there, which makes sense that, yeah, it was a first round finish. I mean, Batgeti, very, very talented. That being said, that does make this one pretty close, because I wouldn't say either one of them have necessarily had the best UFC run yet, but you kind of have to go with the guy that hasn't lost his way out of the UFC, and the younger guy. You kind of got to go with Mana Martinez. That's how I'm going with it. Um, yeah, very evenly matched on paper. What else did I have on here? Yeah, statistically, he would have the edge in this one, Mana Martinez. He is slightly younger. He is slightly more impressive, at least in terms of the recent fights, because he didn't get finished in the first round last time. He made it the distance against Ronnie Lawrence, who's very good. And like I said, he did end up beating Guido Canetti, who clearly is a lot more impressive than people are giving him credit for, because I mean, they thought Chris Moutinho was going to steamroll him. I even thought Chris Moutinho was going to beat him. Then I definitely thought that who did he Randy Costa. I definitely thought that Randy Costa was gonna beat him. So I mean, Guido Canetti is way more impressive than people are giving him credit for. So the fact that Mana Martinez did beat him in a split decision, that is saying more than you'd think. So that's the way that I'm going with it. I do think it's going to be a decision. I mean, these are two lighter guys. They also tend to go to decisions a lot. So that's the way I'm going with it. The odds, fairly close, but they do favor exactly what I was saying. Mana Martinez minus 163, pretty close still. It is early in the week though, so I'm sure that probably is going to go up to minus 180, minus 200 by the end of the week. And then you got Brandon Davis plus 133. I would still have to go with Mana Martinez on this. There's just a lot more going in that direction, and minus 163, that's pretty solid to take advantage of. So that's the way I'm going with it. The over-under is still at 2.5. Makes sense. Like I said, lots of decisions. They're also lighter guys. Makes a lot of sense. Minus 134 for the over 2.5. That is fantastic still. So I will definitely be going towards that. Under 2.5 plus 105. Eh, nah. Not really good enough to take advantage of. I'm going with the over on that one. So I would say a pretty clear way to go on that. Mana Martinez minus 163, over 2.5 minus 134. That's the way I'm going with it. After that, Misha Serkunov, Alonzo Menafield. Not really as close on this one, I gotta say. You got the Canadian curse on the one side. Serkunov hasn't really been doing much of anything recently. A decent amount of losses in a row. Hasn't really been able to pull anything together. Menafield, kind of the opposite. He's been actually getting better and better with his results too. So I think there's a pretty clear way to go. Serkunov, 2-6 in his last 8. He's also 35. Not really good on paper, I would say. That's for sure. Menafield, 34. So he's pretty much the same age, but definitely hasn't looked like it at all. He has been much more impressive, and he's been staying at 205. He even managed to absolutely destroy that fraud, Askar Mozarov, who I don't know how he basically padded his record all the way to the UFC, even got caught doing that. That was the one where they ended up changing his record the week of. So yeah, Alonzo Menafield definitely acted as the gatekeeper to the UFC in that one. Yeah, banished that fraud out of the UFC. So clearly still very, very good. Menafield hasn't lost a beat. And I would say he's actually getting better. Serkunov, on the other hand, not so much, kind of going in the opposite direction. Also, Menafield has beaten Paul Craig and Fabio Chiron in the first round, lost close decisions to Devin Clark and OSP, St. Preux, and even William Knight. Oh, he lost in close decisions, sorry, to Devin Clark, OSP, and William Knight. There's still decisions, but like I said, did finish Paul Craig, Fabio Chiron, and Mojarov. So definitely better like that. Also, like I said, he's been staying at 205 the entire time, which is where this fight is. Sirkunov has gone down to middleweight. That's what he did in his last one. So I think there's also that clear size and power and strength advantage too. So really not looking good on the Sirkunov side. So I'm going Menafield all the way. I'm going for finish too, and I'm gonna be putting him on the parlays as well for this one. The odds, I really should have put. Where's my banner? Where's my banner? Hold on. Where is it? There we go. Banner, please. There it is. We're back with the banner. Okay. Well, I never left, I guess, but the banner is back. So plus 175. This is on Bet99, of course. Plus 175 for Misha Sirkunov right now. Menafield minus 220. I would actually say that that's pretty generous. So I'm taking advantage of this one all day. And like I said, putting this in the parlay at minus 220 for Menafield all day. I mean, I think I don't know if there's going to be an early finish or what, but I would think that there's going to be a first round or second round finish in this for Menafield. I really do think that. So yeah, the odds are looking real good for us this time, minus 220. And then the over under is actually at 1.5 rounds. Again, makes sense considering I wouldn't really say these guys are favored to go the distance. That's for sure. So I would actually, I was gonna say maybe go over the 1.5, but or I was actually gonna say under because I think there is a first round finish there. That's what I'm thinking. So minus 120, you could definitely go for the under 1.5. If you think that Misha can last that long, you could go with the over 1.5. That is at minus 107. So the smarter money might actually be to go with the over 1.5 at minus 107. Just in case, Menafield can't get that finish early enough, I would not be opposed to doing the over at minus 107. But I do think that the mismatch is present enough that you could for sure go with that minus 120 for under 1.5. But I gotta say, it is a real toss up on this one for the over under on this one. So, you could go either way with this one. I really don't know. I would say probably the smarter money, money over the long term might be that over 1.5 at minus 107. But really, you could go either way with this because I did pick first round finish on Tapology, so I'm kind of in the middle on that one. After that, Dushko Todorovic, Jordan Wright. They're both really in the exact same situation here. They both actually started in the UFC undefeated. Jordan Wright 10-0, Todorovic 9-0, and then they both just kind of lost it. They kind of didn't really bring that momentum into the UFC. They've both been losing a decent amount. So really, when that happens, it could go either way. Really could go either way here. But I do think that there is a direction that I'm leaning towards that most other people are leaning towards too. You got to go with Todorovic on this, probably. He's been looking better recently. I think he's actually getting better, whereas Jordan Wright seems to be on the other side of it, where he's just kind of continuously getting exposed, I would say. Not in a good way either. Todorovic, He's also been lasting longer in his fights against pretty tough guys. You know, he did get finished in the first round, but they were huge heavy hitters here. I mean, he got finished in the first round by Chidi and Jokuani. Makes sense. He's got multiple first round finishes in the UFC now. And Puna Soriano, he did lose to him in the first round too. But again, he's got a lot of power, so it kind of makes sense. On the other side, you know, Wright also had the same thing. He also got knocked out in the first round twice, or finished in the first round twice, I should say. Bruno Silva, again, very talented. Barrio, you know, that's where it kind of falls apart a little bit. And he also actually grabbed a couple of early TKO finishes. Todorovic did that as well. So, like I said, they're very evenly matched on paper. That being said, I would say Todorovic has fought the much tougher opponents and did better during them. Like, yeah, he did get knocked out in the first round in a couple of those, but he did better in that time. He used that time to his advantage to look at least slightly better. So that's the way I'm going with it. But again, it is very, very close. That being said, I do think you're probably going to see a finish, whoever wins it. I really do think we're seeing a finish no matter what happens here. But I'm going with Todorovic on this one. Interestingly, there is no over-under on Bet99 yet for this fight, so I can't give you any of that kind of information. But minus 209 for Todorovic and plus 166 for Wright. I'm going Todorovic. You could throw him in a parlay, but I got to say, it's not as convincing. And I think minus 209 might be a little bit generous towards Todorovic on this one. I wouldn't really say that he's got that huge of an advantage on this one. So I'm not sure if I would throw that into the parlay, but I'm definitely going in that direction of Todorovic, though. After that, the first ranked fight of the night. There's only two. There's only two on the whole card that is a ranked affair, and that opens with this one. They're actually both flyweight too. Funny enough, men and women though. So this one you've got Askar Askarov and Brandon Royval. I would say this is probably well, maybe not the most exciting matchup of the night, but it is the matchup of the night that I think you're looking at probably the title contender that's going to fight the soonest, I would say. And that would be Askarov and Royval here. What was I going to say? Yeah, they are fairly evenly matched, but I got to agree with the odds on this one. Askarov definitely holds all the main factors that you would be looking for in this kind of matchup. He was undefeated up until his last fight against Kai France, and to be honest, I was one of those people, one of the many people I would say that thought that Askarov kind of won that fight. I mean, it was close. I thought that he won 2 out of the 3 rounds. I mean, it could have been argued either way. Clearly, it was that close, but I was on that Askarov side. So in my mind, he's actually still undefeated, and he would be at 15-0-1 now. And he has wins over Pantoja, who seems, to be honest to me, I mean, he seems clearly like the next title contender. Doesn't matter who wins in Brazil in January, whether that's Figueiredo or Moreno. I think Pantoja is very clearly the next title contender, and I don't really think there's much of an argument there. I mean, he is unbelievably good, just next level, crazy good Pantoja. So I think that's the clear next contender. But like I said, Askarov does have a win over Pantoja, Benavidez, Tim Elliott, and he also has a draw to the former champ and then now, of course, current title fight contender, Brandon Moreno. So Very, very impressive. On the other side, Royval, he has looked very good, but hasn't really had that same success. He's been just below that. He lost to um oh, he actually did. He finished Kaikara France and Elliott, but and Matt Schnell in the last one, but he did get finished by both Moreno and Pantoja. So, like he's better than like the people below the top 5 for sure. There's a clear-cut difference between Royval and people outside of the top 5. But, you know, people that are actually entrenched in the top 3, top 5, Pantoja, Askarov, Kaikara France, Moreno, Figgy, those people, they're just kinda on the next level a bit, and then Royval's somewhere in the middle. That's kinda what I'm seeing on this for the top 5 there. So, I I would find it hard to believe that Askarov would lose this matchup. This is also his perfect kind of matchup. Somebody who does like to engage in the grappling, and Askarov, I would say, is pretty clearly I would say he might be the second, maybe the third best grappler because of course, you've got Figgy, incredible grappling, and then Pantoja, unbelievable grappling as well. But Askarov, second or third in there because remember, he did beat Pantoja for that exact reason. So, but yeah, I just can't imagine him losing this kind of matchup. I mean, he struggles more so with strikers, and Brandon Royval just doesn't really have that striking in him. And Askarov is just a much better grappler because he is big. He uses that. He uses the clinch. He uses just top control. He controls very, very well. And that's going to be a problem with Royval, especially once Askarov starts to land those takedowns, which he should be able to land them fairly well, I would say. So there's going to be a lot of control coming from Askarov, and I think that's what it's going to be. I wouldn't really necessarily say it's going to be the most exciting fight. I think there's going to be a lot of just a lot of control, and maybe Askarov starts to lock in those submissions that he used to be known for. I mean, he does have a twister. He does have other submissions like that. Royval, very good on the ground as well. So he probably would be able to defend them. But like I said, you never know. Askarov is that kind of guy where he could submit somebody like that at any point. So definitely something to look out for. But I think the decision is the way I'm going with it. It makes the most sense for sure. I mean, like I said, Royval has the submission defense, and Askarov, I mean, I just don't think that there's going to be any striking danger from either side here. So you're talking about who is the best on the ground, and that is Askarov. Is he good enough to get a submission? Yes, but again, I think Royval's defense is up to the point where I don't know if he's going to get finished here, but I do think he's going to get kind of dominated in the grappling. So that to me means that adds up to an Askarov decision. That's the way I'm going with it. And the odds are heavily favoring that as well. Minus 260 right now for Askarov. I would say that might be a little bit too high considering what we've seen from Brandon Royval recently and Askarov recently, of course, him losing his first fight. I'm not sure if I would throw it up there at maybe minus 260 isn't that crazy. Yeah, no, minus 260 actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is pretty fair. I mean, they could have probably easily gone up to minus 300 or something like that, even farther even, because on paper it is fairly one-sided in the Askarov uh on the Askarov side. So I would actually say maybe it is pretty fair. It's about what it should be, minus 260. And I mean, I am of course throwing that in the parlays as well with so far we've got Menefield in there. That's it so far. But we will be adding to that, of course. Especially on the prelims. That is where the real one-sided ones are this week. But yeah, so that's where we're going with it. And the over-under, It is actually at over under 2.5 rounds as well. Like I was saying, there's no real TKO KO kind of threat, I would say, coming from either side, but maybe a submission from the Askarov side, or even maybe Royval locks something in that Askarov doesn't see out of nowhere. Who knows? But you're not seeing a KO here, I wouldn't think. Um, yeah, so it does make a lot more sense to go for the decision on this one. Just statistically speaking, that would make the most sense. So that's the way I'm going with it. Then you've got the co-main event, which is very exciting. You gotta love a Cub Swanson fight. But I gotta say, I'm not sure if I'm going that direction, of course, in the matchup. I mean, he is the underdog in this, and it does make sense. But I gotta say, I think the odds are making this out to be a little more one-sided than they should be. I do think it's a lot closer than what I will say the odds are going to be after. Jonathan Martinez, he did get finished by Davy Grant. By the way, he's only been at bantamweight this whole time. He doesn't have that size that Cub Swanson brings into this, competing at featherweight for most of his career. It could have been no, yeah, I think it's been most. I think he did go to bantamweight a couple of times, or at least one other time, Swanson. But yeah, Jonathan Martinez. But he did, even though, like I said, he did get finished by Davy Grant, and Grant is very good. So I wouldn't say that's even a huge knock on him, but it is getting finished at bantamweight. He did rebound though with 3 impressive decision wins in a row. He did defeat the undefeated at that point, Zviad Alazashvili. And then he beat 2, I would say, pretty impressive rising contenders, Alejandro Perez and Vince Morales. So that is a pretty impressive run that he's gone on since losing to Davy Grant, but not massive names. And remember, we're still talking about bantamweight. So that's where I think it gets a little bit more interesting, because Swanson has been getting finishes at featherweight. So he clearly does have the power, especially since, like I said, he did get finished by Davy Grant just last year in the, or maybe it was a year and a half ago or something, in the, I believe it was the second round against Davy Grant. So, oh, actually, no, it was last year. I literally typed that out. But anyway, so that was early last year. To get finished by a bantamweight in the second round. So, and Cub Swanson did grab a finish at featherweight in his last fight. So I'm not saying it's impossible. That is for sure. Like I'm saying, really the point I'm trying to get across is that it is closer than the odds are suggesting. That being said, I do think that Martinez has a slight edge. Yes, Swanson has that clear edge in finishing ability, but Martinez has been improving. He's been improving quite a bit, and he controls his opponents very well to win those decisions. He doesn't get caught that easily. Yeah, and that is kind of what happened with that Grant kind of thing. He got caught with something big from what I remember, and Davy Grant swarmed in and won it. But from what I remember, it was very, very close before that. Again, I didn't rewatch them this week, so I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but from what I remember, I do remember them being pretty close. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, Gonzalez. Martinez has been controlling his opponents to get those wins. And I think that's what's going to be happening here too. Swanson won't be able to land those huge shots that he's looking for, which will allow Martinez to get up on the cards and then eventually win in the decision. Because that's how I have this one, a Martinez decision. And I mean, that's what the odds are favoring too right now, a Martinez decision. And I do think that is pretty fair. That is pretty fair. Yeah, that is how I have it. But like I said, I don't think people are taking Cub Swanson all that seriously, and which is why I'm not sure if I'm really going to be putting this in the main parlays, because do there is that part of me that's thinking, Swanson has that finishing ability. He's clearly not giving up on that one last kind of run for, I don't know about a title shot, but definitely somebody, getting back into the rankings. He is the kind of guy that's looking for that kind of thing. So, you got to give somebody like that their due. You got to really watch out for people like that. Cause I mean, we even just saw it last week last event with Guido Canetti, because he is doing the exact same thing. He is also slightly older. I mean, Canetti is older than Swanson here, but he is also older, also gets finishes, and also kind of being underrated here. So, take Swanson more seriously. That being said, am I going to put money on Swanson? No, but it does prevent me from going more confidently with Martinez. That's kind of that's kind of the vibe that you're getting with this one, I would say. Is that Swanson definitely does have the chance. So the odds, minus 213 for Martinez, plus 166 for Swanson. Like I said, I think that might be a little bit generous in the Martinez direction. I think it could be a little bit closer than that, maybe minus 180, minus 160 or something like that. So I'm not really going to be putting this in a parlay. I don't think I'm really that confident enough that Swanson is going to lose this one. I'm not really sure. So, yeah. But I am definitely still going with that Martinez side for my pick. The over-under, 2.5, again, makes sense. There's a lot of decisions in there, especially on the Martinez side. He doesn't really necessarily finish people as much. He tends to get the decisions on that. And even for Swanson, actually, he's getting usually decisions as well. So I think that's pretty fair. Yeah. So minus 158 for over 2.5. I think that's pretty fair. That's the way I'm going with it anyway. And under is at plus 122. But I should say, like I said, if you're going on the Swanson direction, you should definitely be going for the under 2.5, because if he's going to win, he probably does need that finish. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So it depends who you're rooting for on this one, I guess. The main event, Alexa Grasso, Viviane Araujo. I think it's pretty clearly one of the best women's fights we've seen in a while. And but I will say, the last women's fight that we saw, Jan and Dern, I thought that was pretty clearly one of the best women's fights we've seen in a while too. And I mean, that's why it was the main event. And I think this one makes sense too. I mean, well, I don't know, actually. I was going to say this deserves to be the main event. It is pretty good. I don't know that I don't know. Actually, yeah, maybe it should be the main event. I was going to say the only other one that makes sense to me for the main event would be that Askar Askarov, Brandon Royval, but yeah, I don't know. They're also coming off Askarov is coming off a loss, so I'm not really sure. Anyway, that aside, this is the real main event, of course. And I guess really they are that close to a title shot that this should be the main event. I don't really see another one on this card that makes sense. Anyway, Grasso, Araujo. It's pretty close on paper, I would say, but I think the odds are pretty fair in this one that, I'm also going with Grasso on this. She does have the name for it. She is, I would say, the bigger name in this matchup for sure. I don't think there's really too much of an argument there. But yeah, she also has earned that with what she's been doing as well. I thought she was pretty one-dimensional at first, clearly more so just a boxer at first, came in at 9-0. She has fallen since then, but that is exactly why I've been going in her direction lately, because she's been learning from those mistakes to become a very well-rounded fighter. She is extremely well-rounded now. Before, didn't really have much of a grappling game. Now, she actually got a submission in her last fight and dominated there against Wood, Joanne Wood, who honestly I thought was going to have a pretty decisive grappling advantage. So I mean, that really just tells you how much better Grasso, how much more well-rounded I should say, and better, I guess, Grasso is than she used to be. And that is exactly why I'm going with her on this one, because she is clearly far and away the better stand-up striker in this matchup. I mean, anyone who says otherwise isn't really paying attention. She's clearly better on the feet. And what people are going to say then is, of course, oh, okay, well, then Araujo's advantage would be on the ground. And of course, you would be right. She would have the advantage if it got down that far. But we saw this exact scenario play out 2 weeks ago. I said the same thing back then. I'm going to say it now. And it's interesting that the odds are reversed in this case, that they actually have picked the well rounded striker in this one, with Grasso being the clear favorite, because I thought, I mean, it's the exact same matchup. We're seeing the exact same matchup we just saw, except for Dern is clearly way better on the ground than Araujo is in this case. But you're seeing the exact same kind of matchup play out. Araujo's best shot to win this fight is on the ground and control her in the grappling. That was Dern's way to victory for Yan Xiaonan, and we're seeing the exact same thing play out here. Araujo's best shot is to get her down to the ground. But I will say the same thing that I said with Yan. She is good enough and well-rounded enough now that I don't think that Araujo will be able to get the fight to the ground as much as she needs to win this fight on the cards. And she's definitely not good enough, I would think, unless she catches her off guard, of course, to grab a submission win over Grasso. I just don't see that happening. So really what you're talking about, once again, just like with Dern, is she's gonna probably win maybe, a couple of the rounds on the cards with her control, the grappling, but the rest of the time, especially as the fight goes on in this case, you've got to go with Grasso because she does have the better cardio. She's got the better striking. She's got that boxing cardio. You know, that's like, yeah, that's impressive cardio when you've got that kind of cardio. I don't think I've ever seen her slow down in any of her fights yet. And that is because of that cardio. So, I mean, 5 rounds, she to me is built for that 5 round fight. Exactly, because that happens with a lot of the boxers. They're built for that kind of thing. Araujo, not necessarily a 5 round fighter in that same way. So that is why I would say the odds are leaning in that direction. Especially since, like I said, Grasso is the more well-rounded fighter in this one, I would say. So especially as the fight goes on, I would say that Grasso would be controlling the fight a lot more, and she will win on the cards. That is how I have it for this one, and I will be putting her in the parlay because of that. The odds, oh, I should say maybe some of the matchups that they've had recently. Araujo, not necessarily. Actually, yeah, I wouldn't really say she's been having the same kind of. Well, she's definitely not getting the same kind of press. She hasn't really been getting the same kind of matchups either. She's gone 3-1 in her last 4, which is pretty significant. She beat Modafferi. That's pretty impressive. You got to do that to be a top contender, because she's kind of she was basically started to be the gatekeeper in between like the top 10 and that 15 to 20 kind of range. That's what Modafferi has been. So beat Modafferi, beat Andrea Lee, which is pretty impressive because she's been putting some good things together too. And then lost to Chookagian, which again makes sense. I mean, Chookagian is that kind of number 2, number 3 kind of contender in the division. Except for when she lost to Amanda Hebos, which I think is pretty clear, but we're letting that go. Anyway, I do think that both of these women should be in the title conversation eventually, but like I said, I just think that Grasso is much closer to that title shot. By the way, she also hasn't even turned 30 yet. So she is very much on that upward trajectory where she is still getting better, rounding out that game, which is what I've been getting at this entire time. That's really the whole focus of what I've been trying to say, is that she is becoming that way more well-rounded fighter. And Araujo hasn't really necessarily been doing that same thing. So that's the way I'm going with it. Minus 225 for Grasso. I think that's a pretty clear parlay opportunity here. That's the way I'm going with it. Plus 183 for Araujo. The over under, classic, again, lighter women. You wouldn't necessarily see this at bantamweight or featherweight, but we're at flyweight here. So yeah, flyweight. I was gonna say I thought it was strawweight for a second, but no, it is flyweight. Minus 234 for over 4.5 makes a lot of sense. Plus 175 for under 4.5. You could definitely see a finish. Maybe the submission for Araujo. Maybe a TKO for Grasso, but honestly, I really do think, classic kind of top tier women's fight here. You're probably going all 5 rounds. So I'm going with Grasso by decision here. I'm going with the over 4.5, and that is at minus 234. So you could even throw that into some other kind of parlay as well. And that is it for the main card. I will talk about 3 of the prelims this time, not just because we have a lot of extra time, of course, but because honestly, I'm pretty impressed by these prelims. There's a lot of really good looking prospects. I would say not necessarily the closest matchups, but the prospects here, actually, all 3 of them are still in their rookie year and they've been doing very, very well. I am very impressed with all 3 of these people. So we're going to start off with the first one. And this actually is a pretty close matchup, this next one. CJ Vergara, Tatsuro Taira. It is very, very close. And I do think that both of them have a pretty good future in the flyweight division. That being said, I will be going in a specific direction. Like I said, I mean, that's kind of the focus of the prelims that I have this time, is that there are 3 very interesting contenders in each of these matchups. And the one for me on this one, in this matchup, would be Tatsuro Taira from Japan, because we haven't really seen any truly impressive Japanese prospects recently. And Taira is one of those. He just made his debut a few months ago. He is still undefeated, and that was against Carlos Candelario, who was also making his debut. I should mention that. So, I mean, he hasn't fought a true UFC fighter yet. But I will say, I was actually pretty impressed by Carlos Candelario, to be honest. He was really, really good as well. So, I would actually say that Candelario is very similar to Vergara in this case. So I would say this is going to be a slightly, a decent matchup for Taira. But I actually do think that he's going to get a finish, because Candelario was very good at the grappling. Vergara, I'm not saying he's bad at grappling, but he's not known for that. He is known primarily for all of that striking, and he has only fought strikers. He lost his debut to Ode Osborne, very clear striker, obviously. That was in a decision, by the way. And then also, what was his other one? Oh, and he won a split decision victory over Clayson Rodriguez, which is, of course, Brazilian, BJJ. So very much a ground threat there. But I gotta say, Taira is definitely a better grappler than Rodriguez in this case. So you could see a decision. It's definitely. Actually, I don't even know. I I was gonna say it would be favored to be a decision, but honestly, I just think that Taira is so good on the ground, and he has a lot of submission wins, a unique submission wins too. We're not talking about regular submissions here. He's getting ones that you don't normally see. So he's very clearly very, very good on the ground. So I would say, a decision makes a lot of sense, but I am actually going for a finish on this one because I think that Tyra is just going to be too much and he's going to eventually get a submission win. Also, this is his second UFC fight. And I'm sure, I guarantee you, he's been throwing everything into the prep of this fight to make a huge statement. So I really would not be surprised if Tyra got a submission win on this one. But these are two lighter guys. We're talking about flyweights again. So, decisions definitely usually the way these fights go. So you could really go either way on this. If you're going safer, trying to throw a lot of these over-unders together, I probably would favor that over 2.5 right now. But I really do think that Tyra has a pretty solid shot at a finish here. Anyway, we'll go towards the odds. Minus 240 for Tyra. I would say that's a little bit generous. I don't think that it's that one-sided. I do think that Vergara has a pretty good shot at winning by a decision here, just because of his good striking. And I mean, like I said, he did beat Clayton Rodriguez by split decision, who is, similar style to Tyra here. So I don't think that it necessarily deserves to be that minus 240. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that's actually kind of insane considering on one site, when I made my bets last night on a different site, I'm not even joking. Tyra was actually at minus 120, I believe, on the site that I was doing. So it was dead even on the other site that I was using to make bets. So very interesting. Either something's happened that people have heard about that they're heavily favoring Tyra now, or it might just be Bet99 having their odds a little bit higher for Tyra for some reason. I mean, I actually thought that minus 120 was a little bit low. I actually was thinking probably a safe range for him was minus 150, minus 160, 170 kind of range. I think Bet99 has kind of gone in the other direction, and the other site I was using is kind of in the other direction. I would say somewhere in the middle would make more sense. But anyway, um, he might be okay for the parlays. I do think that he does have the edge here, but it's so close because these flyweights are so talented now. I really do think that flyweights, except for maybe bantamweight, I think bantamweight is still probably the number one division. Flyweight has got to be number two, just because they're all so well-rounded and so talented now. I mean, these flyweight guys coming up are just unbelievable. And I mean, we saw that with Pantoja and a couple other people that we've seen recently. The 125ers are crazy. And Tyra could be one of those next guys in that top 15. So I'm going Tyra by submission, like I said, but decision is probably the safer bet. So it's kind of better's choice on this one. Again, I'm just here to kind of give you the different perspectives here of how you could go about choosing these, because especially this one, you could really go in any direction with it, depending on what you're thinking here. But I would say the safer bet for sure is Tyra, and might be the safer bet to do the decision, but I still think he's got the skill to get the finish here, especially a submission. Anyway, that is it for that matchup. That was a lot of talking about that one. Then we've got Joanderson Brito, one of my favorite rookies. He is so good. I cannot wait to see him against Lucas Alexander, who has not made his debut yet and hasn't really even necessarily been all that impressive outside of the UFC as well. I don't like saying things like this, but I haven't been wrong about this yet. I think this is one of those situations where the UFC is giving one of their top rated kind of rookies like Almeida, somebody like that, or yeah, just, like Gelton Almeida and Who else have they been feeding people to? Fialio, they kind of did that with at first. Um, I'm trying to think of somebody else. They tried to do it with Mokayev too. Yeah, it's kind of one. He's one of these guys where they're kind of feeding him these people. They want to keep him active and keep the fans excited with a huge finish. And that's what we're doing here. Again, I don't like to say that about people because everybody has a chance to win these, but this is one of these matchups where it's like, this is going to be probably a first round finish. Um, yeah. Brito, still, like I said, still a rookie, but he did TKO Andre Fili in less than a minute into his last fight. He did lose one fight. Oh, yeah, he did lose to Algio. And I mean, I think that was a bit too much too fast because of the cardio of Algio. But I gotta say, it wasn't one-sided by any means, and it was really the cardio of Algio that got to Brito in that case. But yeah, he will not have to worry about this in this case. I mean, he's just got so much power, so much skill, and really could get it done on the feet or on the ground. So I'm not even going to say if he's going to get a KO or a submission here. You're just looking at a pretty early finish, I would say. A dominant win for Joe Anderson Brito. That's what I see coming. And I don't really think this could really go on any either way. I mean, maybe Lucas Alexander is tougher than we think, and he brings him to the third round or a decision maybe, but I just can't see him getting the win because I just think Brito is going to just steamroll over him the first two rounds, if it even makes it that far, and he's going to get the win. So Brito minus 434. I think that is completely deserved. Alexander plus 320. Yeah, I'm throwing that in the parlay all day. And I mean, really, like I said, I think what they're kind of doing is they're giving a showcase fight to a few of these guys in the prelims, and Brito is one of them. And I think Tyra is meant to be one of them, but I think they gave him a much tougher matchup than they did Brito here. And over under is at 1.5 rounds. So, like I said, you can kind of tell what they're kind of doing here, going for the first round. And that is even the favored way to go with this. Minus 134 for under 1.5. So clearly that is where the odds makers think it's going. I think it's going in that direction too. So minus 134, even as crazy as it sounds, makes a lot of sense for under 1.5. If you think maybe he can hold on to the second round, halfway through the second round, I should say, plus 105 over 1.5. It's not crazy to do that because it is just halfway through the second round. It's not that crazy, but I got to say this is looking to be so one-sided that the under 1.5 does make a lot of sense. For the final matchup, and I actually think this is the one that I'm maybe looking forward to the most because I was so wildly impressed by this guy in his first fight of the year, in his first UFC fight earlier this year. And I was so upset actually that he didn't fight the rest of the year. He fought it, I think it was January or February. Might have even been my rookie of the month. I can't remember if I gave it to him or not. Victor Henry, in this case, that's who I'm talking about. I thought he was going to get a third fight in this year, but he decided to wait until now. Rafael Asunciao is his opponent in this one, and I gotta say, this is not even remotely close either. I mean, Victor Henry is the clear favorite in this one, deservedly so. I mean, Asunciao is 40 now. Also has, oh yeah, he's been destroyed in his last 4 fights, all 4 of them. He got finished in 3 of them. He got finished by Marlon Moraes, Cody Garbrandt, and Ricky Simone. And yes, I realize those are 3 very good guys, but you know what? Victor Henry, honestly, I actually think is better than Marlon Moraes and probably better than Cody Garbrandt too. I'm not even joking. This guy is the real deal. He is very, very, very good. I do think Ricky Simone might have him though, but Victor Henry, very, very impressive, especially with the striking. And that is exactly where Asunciao has been falling apart. He's been knocked out in, well, I think all three of those were knockouts. I can't remember. I think maybe two of them were knockouts and one of them was a submission. I don't really remember how he was finished, but I know he was knocked out in at least one of those. Well, the Garbrandt one, that was one of the most brutal knockouts I've ever seen in my life. So, yeah. So Henry being one of honestly the most impressive strikers I've ever seen. Completely relentless, by the way. He never stopped. His win earlier this year, his only UFC fight was against Raoni Barcelos, who we just saw a couple weeks ago. And that is how good Henry is, because we just saw how good Barcelos is and that he should probably be in the top 15. That is how good he is. And by the way, Barcelos would destroy Asunciao. That is how one-sided this one should be. And Victor Henry absolutely dominated that fight against Barcelos. I'm not saying he wasn't really in danger of getting the finish, but he outclassed Barcelos in every single area. And it really was not close when it came to the cards. That's what you're dealing with on this one. So I'm thinking Henry has a pretty good chance at getting a finish here. I mean, like I said, Asunciao has been finished in 3 of his last 4 fights against not even strikers, actually. I was even going to say he was losing to strikers, but I mean, they're not even necessarily strikers. I wouldn't really call Marlon Moraes a power hitter by any means. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just, yeah, I just don't really think this is all that. This is not even remotely close. So I'm going with Victor Henry, of course, minus 375. That is what it's at now. So throwing that into parlay as well. Lots of parlay opportunities this week. I don't really think that the last 2 matchups, at least that I've said, are anywhere close. Plus 280 for Asunciao. Over under is, interestingly enough, it is actually favored to go the distance right now, over 2.5, minus 148. So finally, maybe we found a gap in the market, under 2.5 plus 116 right now. That's where I'm going with it. Makes a lot of sense. I just think there's a huge, huge striking mismatch here where Henry is just far and away so much better. And Asunciao has been struggling quite a bit with that. So I would say that's pretty fair that we're going to see a finish, but yeah, would not be surprised by a decision either. So I wouldn't put a whole lot of money on the fact that he's going to get a finish, but I would definitely put a little bit of cash on a Victor Henry finish and the under 2.5. Although you might as well just go for a Victor Henry finish at that point, because there is absolutely no way that Asunciao is beating Victor Henry by a finish. I'm sorry. No, that's not happening. But yeah, that is it for all the matchups. Let's get into the parlays, and then that's it. We'll call it quits right at the hour mark, pretty much. Let's go in here. Oh, yeah. Rodriguez against Mike Jackson. I mean, how Mike Jackson even got another fight, I have no idea. There is absolutely no way that he is going to be winning this fight unless a miracle happens, which is exactly what happened in his last fight, where he got poked in the eye so hard that he won. That is literally what happened. It was a couple minutes into the fight, he got poked in the eye after he was honestly getting destroyed, and he somehow managed to grab the win from that. Unless that happens again here, I don't see him winning this fight. It's not even close here. Rodriguez is definitely going to win that one. So minus 700. I mean, I'm throwing that in a parlay, I guess. Minus 700 is on that edge where I'm not a huge fan of adding them. But if you've got enough, it really does make just that slight bit of difference. Tyra at minus 240. I'm a bit iffy on. You could throw him in some of your parlays. Who else do we have here? Brito, of course, minus 434. Clear parlay opportunity. Victor Henry, minus 375. Another obvious person to add to the parlay. Menafield, minus 220. I would say, again, that's also one that I'm looking at pretty hard. And then Askarov, minus 260. Definitely leaning towards that. And then Grasso minus 225, I actually think is a pretty good one. And that's kind of where I'm going with the parlays right now. And then maybe, a couple of the over-unders thrown in there as well. Like, who's a good one here? Oh, whoops, that's the wrong mouse. I have a laptop and a computer here, so I've used the wrong mouse. What do we got here? Yeah, I mean, over 2.5 at minus 286 for Maximov and Malkoun. That makes a lot of sense because they're two grapplers that don't necessarily get finishes. That makes a lot of sense. That Tyra Vergara fight, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much it though. Like I said, there are a lot of parlay opportunities though. Like I said, I think there are a few one-sided matchups on this one. So you can definitely take advantage of those, especially if you want to go specific with how they're getting a finish or how they're going to win. I definitely think that that's more so where the money is on some of these. But yeah, that is it for for Vegas. If you want to hear about all the other sports, Area 51 has got you covered. I do all the MMA stuff. If you want to follow all of that, that is down below. That has got Insta, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah. Check it out down below. And then, of course, like I said, the Area 51 website also down there. And that's it. Next week, like I said, we'll be talking about BFL, which is, of course, tonight, actually. And then we've got Vegas to talk about. And then, of course, we'll be talking about. Oh, I thought there was a bug on me. I just need the microphone. Then we'll be talking about, of course, the pay-per-view UFC 280, which, by the way, best card of the year. That's what it looks like to me right now. Dead serious. This is the best card of the year that's coming up next week. I 100% fully believe that right now. And I hope we're not disappointed because this is seriously one insane looking card next week. But that is next week. I cannot wait. Cannot wait to talk about that one. But we've got this one first, and it's got a couple of nice matchups coming up there. That is it for me. I will see ya next time.